Now, if you've ever been driving and you've seen someone on the street corner that looks to be in mental distress, and you think, well, is this a 911 call? That's where Portland Street Response comes in. It's that moment where you're questioning, is this important enough for 911? Robin Burek is the manager for a Portland Street Response, an alternative to police for people who are experiencing mental and behavioral health issues which are not life-threatening. Robin, can you tell me a little bit about what the overall goal for Portland Street Response is?
Absolutely. This is really about sending the right responder to the right response. Our goal is to be able to divert calls that have traditionally just fallen over to police and fire, but it doesn't really fit their mission and what they're intended to do. And it's being able to provide another different sort of response to those types of calls. We've been able to divert about 4% of calls from police.
We're talking, that's hundreds of calls, thousands of calls?
We've responded to, I think now it's about 9,000 calls altogether in our 2 years of operations. 3 categories of calls fall within Portland Street Response's purview: mental health, substance use intoxication, and then general welfare checks, where you pass by someone and they don't look well and you're not even sure if they're conscious or not. They don't have appropriate clothes on for the weather, and it just doesn't look like they're doing well.
And to make the distinction, you see somebody like that, you call Portland Street Response. You see that exact same person, but they have a knife or a razor blade in their hands, you still call the police.
Yes, and the dispatchers will triage. So they're always asking, do you see a weapon present? Is there any criminal activity that's happening?
So it isn't even a separate phone number that a Portland resident has to have. You just call 911 and say, this is what I'm seeing. The dispatcher will help make the distinction between can Portland Response handle it or the police, correct?
You don't even have to worry about it. Just call 911. They'll figure out who the right one is.
That's great. And I've seen the vans. Inside the van is what, a social worker?
We have an EMT paired with a mental health crisis responder. The first year was just a small neighborhood. We weren't even citywide, and now we're citywide. We went literally from 7 people to 58 people in a matter of about 8 months.
I've seen some of the footage of the inside of the Portland Street Response vans, and you have got those things maxed out. I really loved this, and it's indicative of how thoughtful Portland Street Response is. Food for the pets. Anybody who might be suspicious, a person on the streets sees you coming, but then sees, hey, we've also brought stuff for your little dog. You know, do they need anything? And I have to imagine that maybe opens up communication.
Absolutely. Most of the calls that we go on, that's actually been one of the best things about our program, I think, is the ability to be like, hey, before we leave, can we leave you with a bottle of water? I see you're not wearing any shoes. Would you like some shoes? We have a pair. And ultimately, what we're about is caring about their welfare and making sure that they feel safe.
I was really happy to discover that I live in a city where something like that exists. And I think people get hesitant sometimes to call any sort of emergency service because they don't know if it qualifies.
Absolutely. And any sort of questionable behavior where you're like, this is out of the social norm, don't hesitate to call and request Portland Street Response.